Good evening. I'm political editor Dennis Welch, and this is Politics Unplugged. And tonight we are taking a look at the Senate race for District 28. It's that area right there in the center of the map, covering a large section of north central Phoenix. And those candidates are Republican Kate Brophy McGee and Democrat Eric Meyer. Now, both have served in the Arizona House, but only one of them will be returning to the Capitol. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, before we start getting into the specific issues, I kind of want to give this race a little bit of context. Now, Democrats are kind of hopeful that they can pick up more seats, potentially even split the Senate 15-15, and that would be the first time that's happened in 15, 16 years. So what's at stake here? Explain. We'll start with you as the Democrat here. What's at stake here? Big picture.
Big picture, what's at stake is funding for our schools, our universities, and jobs. I mean, we have cut billions of dollars. When I say we, the Republicans in control have cut billions of dollars from our schools over the last 8 years. We had an opportunity to restore some of those this last year when we had a surplus. We didn't do that. So, you know, the people I'm working with to get elected around the state to the Senate have committed to fund our schools, fund our universities, and create jobs here in Arizona.
And well, same question to you. I mean, obviously, Republicans have enjoyed a large majority in the Senate now for a number of years. How would it change if Democrats were able to even up the Senate? Obviously, because this is one of 3 or 4 races across the state where Democrats are looking to make those big gains.
Well, I know the Democrats put forth that premise every 2 years. I thought myself that it might be an issue this year. I don't believe that it will be. But at the end of the day, for District 28, which is our district, they are looking to elect a moderate, responsible policymaker who will go down there and get things done.
Yeah, and obviously you guys are kind of a rarity in the Capitol because you are moderates. Explain a little bit about that. Where have you bucked your party in the past? There's some pretty big issues in the past.
Well, as far as standing up for things like Medicaid restoration, standing up in my first term as a state representative for $2 million in funding for a breast cancer treatment program for uninsured and underinsured women, standing up for a standalone agency, the Department of Child Safety, pulling it out of DES, and in addition, this last session, reviving kids care from the operating table and bringing it forward and getting it passed.
Yeah, and these are all issues I know that you have supported on that. What separates you two other than a letter by your guys' name on a ballot?
Oh, we have huge differences in our voting record. Let's take public education, for instance. Kate's record on public education and Arizona Schools Now just came out with a report looking at 15-16 education votes around the budget. Kate scored a 38% on that. I got 100%. When I offered up an amendment to restore $120 million that were cut last year from the budget, Kate voted no on that. And Kate has consistently voted to remove monies from our district schools and give that to private schools in the form of tax credits and vouchers. So our voting records are very different. I think if we want to actually fund education, I mean, we've been hearing year after year, we need to get Republican moderates down to the Capitol. They just haven't done the job. You know, you saw today, ASU came out with a study, 74% of residents think we need to increase funding for education. And I can tell you I'm committed to do that for the residents of District 28 and for our state, and Kate has a record of not doing that.
All right, do you care to respond to that?
I certainly do. The issue is, let's unpack what a report card or a score consists of. I have gotten a lot more money for education. In this past budget, I got $125 million. There was also Proposition 123, which has infused another $225 million. I voted yes on those. My opponent voted no. At the end of the day, you have to look at legislation not just in terms of how you vote on a bill. It's whether or not it passes if you voted for it, or whether or not it fails if you voted against it. I can't think of a single instance where my opponent has passed legislation that with his and his party alone, without the help of Republicans. You have to get 31 votes, 16 votes, and 1 signature in order for something to become law. So pretty much everything that he wants isn't possible when it goes to the floor.
Now, Mr. Wright, a minute ago you brought up school choice. Now, this has become really, it's not just a parochial Arizona issue. This is obviously a national issue, and I think we have some sound right now of the Republican standard bearer right now, Donald Trump, speaking to this issue. Here, let's take a look. Listen.
We want every disadvantaged child to be able to choose the local public, private, or charter school, a magnet school, any of these schools that is best for them and for their family, for mom and dad. Each state will develop its own formula, but we want the dollars to follow the student.
Get your reaction to that.
Well, first of all, in Arizona, we have a constitutional provision against vouchers. But one of the things that we do have that I think obviates the needs for vouchers is one of the most robust school choice programs in the state. We have proponents for district schools, charter schools, and private schools. And the key is to preserve and protect those choices for parents without disadvantaging one of the other choices. And I think what my colleague is referring to is the ESA and the expansions, which I think I have voted against the majority of those and stopped the big one from coming to the floor in two of the past 2 years.
Well, first of all, it's great that you do all this by yourself, because you just said it takes 31 and 16. And for all the things you mentioned at the beginning of the show that you've accomplished, it took, for instance, kids care, where you walked out on the vote on budget night. It took 24 Democrats to get that passed. We've been fighting for that as a physician. I've been fighting for that and voted against the initial cut. So everything takes 16 and 24. When it comes to Mr. Trump's comments, we do all that already here. We have choice. The money flows with the kids. The problem is there isn't enough money. And Kate's voting record is Kate's voting record. She has not voted to fund our schools. She's voted for cuts to our public schools and funds going to our private schools. My voting record is my voting record. I got a 100% score on that Arizona Schools Now survey, and I will continue to be an advocate for our kids down at the Capitol. I did that prior to getting elected, and I will continue to do it as a state senator.
Well, I too am an advocate for kids, and I served on a school board for almost 10 years. The difference between us is that I find the 31 votes, I find the 16 votes, and I get the one signature. I work with my moderate Republican colleagues in this last session, not so moderate Republican colleagues. You vote against the things we bring to the floor, budgets that increase money to education, because I guess it doesn't meet your standards. You voted against Prop 123, you voted against the 1-cent sales tax. I look for what is possible, for what can be done. I work with the majority caucus to get that done. And I think that's the difference between us. I get it done.
I work all the votes you talked about. Took 24 Democrats to get kids care passed and Medicaid expansion passed and all those other things. When it comes to Prop 123, I voted for the expansion of the funding, and actually I offered up a plan where we could have just done it out of the general fund, which you voted against. And you voted for caps to keep us so we can't get past Mississippian per pupil funding. And you voted for education to be the first thing that we cut if the economy slows. On the flip side, you voted to automatically build private prison cells if inmate population grows. I can tell you over and over again, I have voted for our schools. I will continue to vote for our schools. And this is what is important about getting to 15 in the Senate. It will give the public what they want. Some of our policies will actually get a hearing. Some of our policies will get heard. And maybe we will actually increase per pupil funding in our state.
You know, you bring up the idea of these private prisons, and this is getting something that's gotten a lot of attention. It kind of ebbs and flows, and right now it is getting a lot of attention. The federal government obviously reviewing its policies when it comes to private prisons. Do you support the expansion? Do you think this is a good idea?
I think Arizona has overinvested in private prisons. What I will tell you we did this last session was there was a proposal in the budget to increase the number of beds in private prisons. We dialed that back and redirected that money into transition programs. We were able then to preserve more money in a fiscally responsible budget that we then directed to universities and education. And the part that my colleague is not telling you is that he hasn't figured out how to pay for any of his proposals. And when they come to the floor, they're dead on arrival. He doesn't have the votes.
Well, I would love to respond
to that.
My proposals never get to the floor. They never even get assigned to committee. For instance, on private prisons, I had a proposal to create a commission, much like Utah did, to look at sentencing, probation reform. They have saved their state hundreds of millions of dollars. That bill didn't even get a hearing. And these are red states, Utah, Florida, and Texas, and they've driven those dollars back into public education. This year in the budget, we just funded inflation and student growth. So our schools were left right where they were. And if you talk to any of the teachers or superintendents out there, they'll tell you that's exactly what's happened, and it's happened year over year. So your leadership has taken us right down that path to almost the lowest per pupil funding that we've had in recent history.
And you know, and I know that budgets aren't perfect, and that it takes 31 votes to pass one. This past year, I fought for 36 votes because we got more things in it. I actually thought it was a budget you could have voted for, although you chose not to. At the end of the day, there are many competing priorities throughout the state of Arizona, and I am able to work with members of my caucus to put those priorities together and make it better for education. You know, and I know that there were some very punitive policies that were enacted in the prior year's budget that you and I both voted against that would have gone into place if we hadn't stopped it. I wish we need to do more for education. I am committed to doing more for education. But the difference between you and me is I can get it done.
Well,
and what you've gotten done are those cuts. So if we get to 15 in the Senate, back to your original question, I can tell you that the budget will have...
And what I've gotten done is Prop 123.
Well, Prop 123 has those caps, it has those triggers. It moved us from 49th in per pupil funding to 49th in per pupil funding. So what we need to do is increase our funding. We're still at 49th in per pupil funding, and that hasn't happened. And so to get to your point about our differences, and to your initial question, if we can get to 15 in the Senate, it gives the public a chance to have some of these other ideas heard. We could have funded the inflation funding lawsuit. In fact, I voted against the cuts that were made to inflation funding and offered up a plan to do it out of the general fund. And instead, you and your colleagues use those dollars for other things. Tax cuts, special interest tax cuts, private prisons, and how I would fund education, I would get rid of many of the programs that you voted for and started. STOs, vouchers, tax credits, special interest tax credits, all the tax cuts that we've made, hundreds of...
I'd like to give you a minute to respond to that.
Those are wonderful, wonderful ideas. Find me 31 votes and we'll talk.
Yeah,
You've never been able to do that. I have been able to do that. And it's Prop 123, by virtue of its passing, just barely, sets up the conversation for 4, 5, 6. If you'd have had your way, we would have still been litigating. We would have still been paying those lawsuits. The schools would still have been starving. Now we're in a place. Now we're in a place. Excuse me. Now we're in a place to have 4, 5, 6, not because of you.
It's been a long. We could have had 4, 5, 6 last session. My way would have been to fund it out of the general fund.
You always moved the bar. You always set the bar higher.
Well, and that's what I'll do if I'm elected to the Senate. I will vote to support public education. You will continue to.
I really don't think that Senate dream is going to happen unless we can figure out a way to sew wings on pigs. But at the end of the day, you send a budget up to the governor, that's your one. He's got to be able to sign it, and you have a Republican governor.
We'll find out on November 8th.
All right. Now, let's stick in with education, because the other big component of that here in this state, obviously, is higher education. We've seen tuition increase. We've seen big cuts over the number of years to universities. What's the difference between you two on this? Are you going to put more funding into higher education? Are you going to do something to stop tuition from increasing?
Absolutely, and we did with this last budget. We paid off $200 million in rollovers to the university. We put in some fixed funding.
Still doesn't make up for the cuts.
No, it does not.
I mean, deep cuts.
The universities have presented a plan to bring. Currently, we were at 24%. We got to 32%. We need to bring it to 50% state funding versus tuition funding.
All right, we got 30 seconds left.
There was very little money in the budget for universities this year. There was $5 million for freedom schools that you voted for, that is expressed intent
and no budget is perfect, and you know that.
Please don't interrupt me. I haven't interrupted you.
Yes, you have.
$5 million for freedom schools and a little bit more money for one-time monies for construction projects on the campuses. I had an amendment, or one of my colleagues did, for $50 million to the universities. Kate missed that vote by walking out. We could have done it this last session without raising taxes, without putting the budget out of balance.
All right, 10 seconds, and then we got to take a break.
If you had the 31 votes, you're correct. We didn't have the 31 votes, and we didn't have the guy on the 9th floor agreeing with any of this. At the end of the day, a moderate Republican in a closely aligned Senate can get a heck of a lot more done than a well-intentioned Democrat.
All right, well, we're going to have to end it there. I'm sorry. I know this is going to be a very spirited campaign all the way into November, but we have lots more to come here on Politics Unplugged. Up next, the latest on the race for Congressional District 5. Razor-thin margins and a trip to court bring some added drama to Arizona's primary election.
I think under the leadership of Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, the generals have been reduced to rubble.
And still ahead, the candidates for president make their case to be commander-in-chief. A closer look at the race for the White House. Still ahead.
Ramsey was found murdered in her home.
John Bonet's brother finally breaks his silence.
Did you hit your sister over the head with a baseball bat?
The Dr. Phil exclusive. Monday at 3 on 3TV. Crashes happening over and over at this Valley intersection. Now a doctor tired of lives lost is sounding the alarm.
I end up seeing head injuries, which cause brain damage.
What to know before you take this exit. Thursday at 9, only on 3TV.
You know, you paid too much for those glasses.
Who?
You. You paid too much. Practically everyone overcharges, except for America's Best.
Who?
America's Best. They give everyone a deal. In fact, you can get 2 pairs of glasses and a free eye exam for just $69.95.
2?
2.
2.
2.
Who?
Stop it. 2 pairs and a free exam for $69.95. It's not just a better deal. It's America's Best.
If you like Jeeps, you'll love Sullivan Motor Company's Jeep Mania. Hard tops, soft tops, lifted, custom wheels, bumpers, lights, and winches. We've got it all. Dozens to choose from. Pick your Jeep and customize it just how you want it on site. Plus a 3-month or 3,000-mile warranty on all vehicles in stock. And 0% financing OAC. Get $3,000 minimum for your trade. That's only at Sullivan Motor Company's Jeep Mania. Going on this weekend.
Hi, my name's Bob.
Hi, Bob.
So I see this ad on TV. Says I can reduce my debt by 50%. So I call. They told me to stop paying my bills, stop talking to my creditors. It didn't seem right, but they said they'd take care of everything.
I gave them thousands of dollars, but most of it went to their fees.
Getting out of debt is neither quick nor easy. There are those who will tell you anything just to win your trust.
Sounded perfect. I did everything they told me to do.
They never paid my creditors. They didn't even contact them.
Turns out I'm even more in debt because the fees and the interest on my cards kept piling up.
Bad advice from so-called experts can make your financial situation worse.
And the bank turned me down for a mortgage. And that's when I realized my credit was shot.
I should have gone straight to my creditors to begin with.
There is a better way to get help. Talk to your creditors directly. Or to find a nonprofit agency near you, visit debtadvice.org. Debtadvice.org. Real solutions for real people.
And welcome back to Politics Unplugged, and we are still on the campaign trail, and we are joined now with our partners from First Strategic. With us today is Marcus Delortino and Steve Roman. Guys, thanks a lot. Now let's talk a little bit about this District 28 race that we just saw. That debate. It was a lot more spirited than I thought it was going to be. It's going to be a pretty heated race. Does this lean Democrat, Republican, and who's going to win? We'll start with you, Steve.
I think it's going to be leaning right down the middle. Just like you saw, you have 2 very, very good candidates. I think this leads into, for many people, can the Senate be flipped in any way? Can you go from what's currently a Republican Senate? If you get 2 more people that can basically change over, you'll be able to have a split Senate, and 3 will make it a Democratic Senate. And a lot of people, I think, are betting certain ways that it can flip, and other people are saying, well, if it doesn't flip, do we want to keep a moderate in there, at least on the Republican side, to help our views on the moderate side with the Republican.
All right, Marcus, now you've got a PhD in the legislative arts over there. Is this is this realistic for Democrats? Because Brophy, McGee, she was right. You hear this every couple of years. Democrats are saying, "Oh, we're gonna even this up, or we're gonna get the numbers, and we're gonna take back the Senate." Never really happens.
True, but let's be clear that the dynamics have changed dramatically. Donald Trump's on the ballot, and things have the science of the past is not held true this election cycle, and anything is possible. This particular district, Republicans have an edge. There's absolutely no doubt about it in voter registration. But keep in mind, this district's different than the rest of the state in that education's the #1 issue, not immigration. Gun rights aren't the #1 issue. It is all about education. It's about children. It's about health care. And so that would usually play into a Democratic-based message.
All right, let's move over to the other big race here in the state, Congressional District 5. I mean, it's still ongoing. We're in court. Now, as of today, we tape on Fridays, a judge had ruled that he's going to allow 18 more ballots to be counted. And these were ballots cast by voters who went to the wrong precinct, cast provisional ballots there, and they were told that their ballots would count when, in fact, they didn't count. With these 18 ballots, I mean, there's a razor-thin 9-vote difference between Andy Biggs and Christine Jones right now. With these 18 ballots, can Jones make up the real estate?
Sure, it's entirely possible, but it's, which way, I don't think you can trust percentages any longer. You're only talking about 18 ballots. Now, what we don't know, we have no idea how those individuals voted. If you go by percentages, it would be very difficult to make up those 9 votes. If you go by the fact that these people could have been in one person's camp or another, then it could totally switch. We're not going to know at all until they count the votes, and then there's going to be a recount after that. I doubt if that recount's going to change anything.
Now, last week we asked the question, how could Andy Biggs be so close, having been the establishment guy? Well, this week I got to ask, how could Christine Jones be down by 9 votes after having spent about $2 million of her own money when it's all said and done?
Yeah, well, I think everybody predicted it was going to be a tight race. It was going to be razor-thin margins. But can I really quickly regressing here? What's also concerning about this court case is that, in fact, the judge has, to a certain extent, rewritten state law to allow these provisional ballots to go in. So there's, it's an interesting take. This is not the last you've heard of this case. I am pretty sure Dennis will be reporting on this in January as this works its way through the courts.
For the record, though, I think a couple of weeks ago, Marcus and I were deciding who was going to win, and he took one side, I took another. Not that we were for one or the other, but just kind of calling it. Right now, it's right down the middle, and
so far we're both right.
Yeah, right, exactly.
We're going to have to take a quick break, but we'll be back with more because we have lots more to talk about here on Politics Unplugged.
We have to defeat ISIS. That is my highest counterterrorism goal. They are not going to get ground troops.
I have a great plan. It's going to be great. Well, what is it? I'd rather not say. I want to be unpredictable.
Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump talking foreign policy. Just ahead, a closer look at the candidates who want to be the next commander-in-chief.
It was senior year, and the whole school was cheering for her. And just seeing the smile on her face, and then looking at the whole school, and people were crying, and people were cheering, and just seeing how the whole school came together just for her was the most amazing thing ever.
Special Olympics has changed my life so dramatically.
I surely realize that what I'm doing is for a great cause.
It's helped me a lot to be fearless, in the real world.
I learned that friendship doesn't have limits.
My friends I've made through Special Olympics are the best people I've ever met in my life. And it's not about disabilities, but it's about celebrating their abilities.
It makes you feel like a wonderful person, and your life changes forever.
I've made a difference. Now it's your turn to make a difference.
We are champions together.
Making a difference every day.
aren't fully developed until at least 39 weeks, which means babies born even a few weeks early can have breathing, feeding, and learning problems. If your pregnancy is healthy, wait for labor to begin on its own. A healthy baby is worth the wait.
We're the rise to every challenge type. The nothing is impossible type. The type that knows the time will come when we put type 1 behind us. We're the plan for a cure type. The improve life along the way type. The type that will stop at nothing until type 1 becomes type none.
And now let's move on to presidential politics. Of the candidates on both sides are on the trail this week, and they were setting up for what was known as the Commander-in-Chief Forum. Now, this was a big nationally televised gig, really the first time they've been on the same stage since they launched their bids for the presidency. And we heard from Donald Trump on this, and he was really kind of talking down about the military, saying the generals are in rubble, plays into this whole doom and gloom scenario that we've heard from him in the past. Is this going to win him votes in the general election, though?
I think it very well might. I mean, let's take a look at what has been in the newspaper recently. I mean, the North Koreans, as of this morning, have developing a nuclear missile that can reach L.A., San Francisco, and Seattle, and more surprisingly, Phoenix, Arizona. Fact. So, you know what? And it plays into the fact that, you know, the Department of Defense has gone through significant cutbacks. We can talk about Congress and the reasonings why. But the fact is defense spending has not been up, and I think it does play into his argument very well.
Now, we also heard in the bump there, Donald Trump talking about he's got this great plan to defeat ISIS, but he doesn't want to say what it is because he wants to be a surprise. Voters going to buy that?
I don't buy it.
Well, tell us what you really think, Steve.
So as an independent, I can only speak for others that I think like me, but I don't know. I think that if you like Trump, you're going to like what he said, and if you don't like Trump, you're not going to like what he said, and you're going to like what Clinton said. The question is, those folks in the middle, and there's still probably about 20% that are undecided, which is very high for this time of year. Those are the people that are going to decide. Something like that. I have a great plan, but I'm not going to tell anybody what it is. That to me doesn't do much for me.
This is playing this whole idea that he doesn't really talk details on policy.
It does play into that, but let me quickly refresh your memory of another guy who said something similar, and that's John McCain. And John McCain said, "Listen, I'm not going to tell you where I'm going to punch you and what time I'm going to punch you. I'm going to give the people generalities about where we are in defense and what our strategy is, but I can't get into tactics." Donald Trump just didn't say it as smoothly and as well, but everybody running for president will not give out the exact.
I think John McCain's got a little bit more
Everybody knows John McCain knows defense. There's very few people in this world that knows more than John McCain. The question is, do people have questions about Donald Trump's knowledge? And when he says those kinds of things, that begs that question.
And real quick, we got to talk a little bit about Hillary Clinton. She was in that Commander-in-Chief forum. She cannot escape that email question.
No. It's going to chase her the rest of the campaign, and clearly we're watching that in polls all over the country. Look, this race is tight. You can't deny it. Look at North Carolina, look at Ohio, look at Pennsylvania. And then, Dennis, to your overall point, which is how is Trump surviving through this? If you look at the news this week, we got Wells Fargo laid off 5,400 employees for fraud, essentially. That's frustrating the American people. It goes to Trump's message that the inside game is rigged. You've got EpiPens that parents are using that have gone through astronomical.
Unfortunately, that's all the time we have this week on Politics Unplugged, but be sure to tune in next week for more Politics Unplugged. Good night.